Alrighty, it's that time again. Rethinking retiring in the Philippines. Yeah, that's a thing. It's very, very interesting. Earthquakes, volcanoes, typhoons. I mean, what do you have to say with all of those horrible things?
Oh my.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. I'm Steve, the retired hobby tech guy. I'm an American expat in Korea who's retired here with my beautiful and lovely wife. We've been together over 35 years now. That's the crazy part. It doesn't feel like 35 years. It feels more like it's 15. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Zombie Hunter pops in and says, hey, how's it going? Good, good. Korea definitely doesn't have the earthquakes, volcanoes, and typhoons. I mean, we get storms that hit Korea from the southern tip and kind of comes up and things like that, but nothing on the magnitude that the Philippines or Vietnam gets. And yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. It is an interesting phenomenon for those retiring and considering the Philippines or Vietnam. That seems to be a big thing here. So many videos are talking about overseas retiring, and I've talked about it because of the reduced expenses, and there's going to be some trade offs with that. You know, you're not going to live maybe in the same type of environment or the same type of amenities that you would get if you're in the United States or your home country. You might have to make some compromises. There'll be things that'll be done different from your home country to an overseas country, especially like Philippines or Vietnam, which, by the way, Vietnam does not have a retirement visa as of this video. So when you see a number of people making YouTube videos, oh, retire in Vietnam and blah, 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 it's like they're exploiting a loophole. It's a gray area, and because there's no retirement visa in Vietnam. And so I find it a little bit disingenuous that you'll have YouTubers that will talk about that. Oh, here's how much it costs for this, which I don't have problems with budgets and things. I do that for here in Korea. You know, we lived here just over 3 years at this point. But when you say retire, that means, in my mind, you have a legal visa in which you can retire in that country, and basically, it's clickbait. I mean, everybody does clickbait to some degree, and unfortunately, the thing that gets up my nose when people say retire in Vietnam, there is no retirement visa. So they're exploiting a loophole of like tourist visas, and you go for 60, 90 days, whatever it is. You go to Cambodia for a day, you come back to Vietnam or, Laos or whatever, and you come back to Vietnam, and then you do another 90 days. So every 90 days or so, whatever, the visa is allowed for your home country, for your citizens, they exploit that. And this has been done many times. If we talk about Thailand, I've been to Thailand and Phuket and Bangkok and things like that. What was the other one? Phi Phi Island. Oh, great vacation spot. I remember when we went there, you could actually swim on Phi Phi Island and go, but I guess now you can't do that anymore. And it was closed down for quite a long time. Anyway, I digress. Thailand, you had a ton of people that would retire in Thailand by doing border jumping, by going there on a tourist visa for, say, 90 days, and before the end of 90 days, they jump over the border, spend one day, and then they come back to Thailand, and then every 90 days, they got to jump back and forth. Terry pops up. Hey, good morning, sir. How's it going? Good, good, good. Terry sent me some information, and I talked to him, I chatted with him, talking about the things in the Philippines, which yesterday I was going to do this video, but I got kind of lazy and hit the gym, and I just didn't get it. Nedventive, hey, welcome back. Good to see you. Good to see you. We got some regulars here. Now we need Ferrithus to pop in. We need a couple of Adams. We need a few other folks. There's some people that haven't been around for a while, so it kind of makes me wonder. Anyway, so talking about like Vietnam, you get people that will try to exploit the visa system on a tourist visa to stay longer and retire in that country. And as I called out numerous times before in the past, countries are going to be taking and tightening up the belts, starting enforcing the standards in all these gray areas. Countries are cracking down on visa overstays or the abuse of the visa system. When it's there's some reports of people that were like doing this for like 5, 6, 7, 10 years or whatever, and all of a sudden, the country says nope. They do their little day trip over to the next country. They come back and they're like, no, sorry, you've been abusing the visa system. You cannot. And it's like, holy crow, what? Could you imagine? I mean, how do you put yourself in that situation? Well, I know how you put yourself in that situation. But if they say that you can't enter the country anymore because you abused the system and they're now enforcing the laws or they made new laws, one or the other, or both, what do? All your stuff's in that country. You've been there for 5 multiple years or more, 10 years or whatever, and then you just can't go back in. What do you do? What do you do with all your stuff? And I warned people about this, and people, oh no, 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 no. And sure enough, countries have been tightening up their visa programs and their laws, enforcing them. Also increasing income requirements for a number of countries. We've seen that, and of course that came into play. So when people say, Vietnam, oh, you need to retire in Vietnam, there's no retirement visa. They've been talking about a retirement visa for quite a long time, but it just has never come to fruition, which, if Vietnam ever did, that might be a good thing. But this goes back to the topic at hand of rethinking retiring in the Philippines. And if Vietnam does have a retirement visa, if they ever get one, one of these days, do natural disasters come into play when you're thinking about retirement? And I think it does. And mostly this has come out. I knew about the Ring of Fire because back in school, when I was a youngster, and you had black and white TV, and well, actually, there was color. Star Wars came out in, like, what was it, 1977, I think it was. I saw Star Wars, the very first one. So yeah, I'm old as dirt. Things were different a long time ago, but now I knew about the Ring of Fire. We learned it in school. I don't know why I remembered the Ring of Fire. The tectonic plates and around that, and the volcanoes and all that stuff, and earthquakes. For some reason, that stuck with me. Well, it's still a thing, and it's been going on for decades, obviously. So the Philippines is right in the way of where that Ring of Fire and the tectonic plates, and there's a lot of activity when it comes to natural disasters. I know we've been seeing this recently in the news. Matter of fact, I want to talk about that, and we'll take a look at, not that there. We want to take a look at, no, we don't want to look at that. We want to look at, what do I want to look at? I want to look at this right there. There we go. So, Philippines typhoon news. Super typhoon Fengguang batters Philippines. Nearly 1 million people are evacuated. Zombie says, I had the Ring of Fire the other night when I had too much curry. Dun, dun, dun. Or Taco Bell. It could be curry or Taco Bell. Terry pops up and says, when people in the Philippines renew their tourist visa after 1 year or more, they're starting to ask why they haven't upgraded their visa. Yeah, they're cracking down on it. And they've changed some of their immigration rules in regards to retirement visa. Philippines does have a retirement visa. But probably the biggest news that we've seen are the 2 typhoons that have hit the Philippines. And this is the second one. So let's just take a gander and see how this goes. Wow, 1 million people evacuated. Strong winds, torrential rains. Power outages, imagine that. Got like 200 mile an hour or 200 kilometers per hour winds. Pretty much the whole country is just like in a state of emergency. Gusts up to 230 kilometers per hour. That is crazy. Wow. About 1 million people evacuated. Storm surge of 3 meters. It's over 15 feet. Just constant flooding. Bridges, infrastructure. One of the world's most disaster-prone nations. Yeah, that's kind of a thing. It is pretty rough. So, talking about that ring of fire thing, Yumi Mango says, I fell into a burning ring of fire. If you get that reference from Johnny Cash, good on you. So, Yumi, you get this gold star for the day. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy what we end up seeing here. It's definitely the typhoons and the storms, and when you have over 1 million people that have been evacuated, and then there's the number of people that probably should have been evacuated, that number goes even higher, and the death toll hasn't even been accounted for. And I think my wife was telling me on Korean news, they said that the death toll has gotten over 300 people. But when you look at some of the footage, especially you have those small villages, dirt roads in the provinces and low-lying areas, just totally gone. I mean, how accurate is that number for the death toll? So, I think for me, I can speak for me. If I was going to retire in the Philippines, it definitely wouldn't be in the province. There's people that do that. They live in the shack and things like that with the dirt floor and the chickens, and they love the off the grid type of thing. That's not me. That maybe at one time when I was younger, but I'm 59, so that is probably not going to be a thing. If I was going to retire in the Philippines, which we thought about doing as a backup plan to retiring here in Korea, Philippines has a great retirement program for retirees. And especially for retired military like myself, they have the SRRB courtesy visa, which has a minimal deposit that you put into a bank, like a down payment type of thing. It's great terms. Income requirement isn't bad. Excuse me. With the low income requirement, you're going to get a lot of people, a huge amount of different types of people, and some of them are not going to be as nice as others. George pops in and says, howdy, hey, good morning, or at least here in Korea, it's morning. But, with the Philippines, their retirement, and like I said, their income requirements are going to change. And if you're for me and my wife, we like our apartment here in Korea. I bought an apartment here in Korea. So if somebody tells you that foreigners can't buy property in Korea, tell them that's wrong. There is a crackdown in certain areas of Seoul to minimize the foreign nationals buying high value property that just keeps going up and up and up. But for people like me that aren't rich, we bought our apartment and we're good to go here. Foreigners can buy property in Korea. It just needed an additional piece of paper. Government, you ask approval. They said yes, it's not a big deal. But when it comes to the Philippines, for our standard of living and the amenities that we want, we would probably be in one of the bigger cities in the Philippines. So it would probably be BGC. It would probably be nicer parts of Manila. What is it? The Eastwood city is really, really nice. Some of those areas where everything is there, you've got good Korean, or good Korean, you've got good medical, they got good Korean restaurants as well. Stores, malls, the whole 9 yards, great walkability. Those would be the places that I would go to retire. But it's with all of that, it makes me wonder what are the conditions for natural disasters in those areas and what do those places look like now? Because we see all the horrible, horrible things that is happening in the Philippines with these recent typhoons and earthquakes and so on and so forth. But what are these big industrial cities and metropolitan areas? What does it look like there? So, yeah. Corsair the Pirate pops in, says, I usually get the Ring of Fire after Korean hot chicken. For me, it's Taco Bell. So, yeah, the Ring of Fire. Sad part is a lot of kids today and younger people have no clue about that reference whatsoever. We have Dale, Mac 3D. Greetings from the UK. Well, hello, sir. Welcome to the channel. Yumi pops up and says, Yumi Mango. I like the name. I like mango. Korea way better than the Philippines. And yeah, we don't have the problems in Korea that the Philippines has with natural disasters. We will still get some storms. We'll get some bad storms. It'll hit. Of course, if you know where the peninsula of Korea is and the storms go past the Philippines and kind of hit, they'll either hit, Philippines is down here and then they can go hit Vietnam. We'll get some storms that will come up the peninsula of Korea, but nothing like, we'll get flooding and we get some bad flooding in Korea, but it is nothing compared to what we've seen in the Philippines. So that is kind of crazy. And so I wanted to go over some information that I've been digging up about the Philippines. So it is highly prone to natural disasters because of its location to the Ring of Fire, whether it's spicy hot chicken, Taco Bell, but more of the tectonic plates that, the earthquakes and volcanoes. It is the typhoon belt of the Western Pacific Ocean. And here's what I found out. In the Philippines, it has about 20,000 earthquakes a year. 20, mostly a lot of minor tremors and things like that, with about 20 of them felt daily throughout the Philippines. There's 7,000 or 8,000 different islands in the Philippines. So depending on where you're at, you can feel them. Has remained relatively stable in the past decade with no upward trend, but there are some with significant earthquakes with magnitude of 6.0 and larger that vary from year to year. And there was in 2017, there were two that were 6.5 and 6.5. 2019, there were 7 that were over 6.0. That was a big year. They had one in 2020, one in 2021, 2022. There was one that was 7.0. 2021, there was a 7.1 in Davao. 2023, there was 2. And 2024, none recorded. But I think they had a recent one that was, I think, above the 6 or into the 7 range. But as far as that, so we have those things to deal with. I mean, that's a lot of earthquakes. And having lived in California, experienced earthquakes, and those are really crazy. Those are really crazy to go through an earthquake. And I've been through some big ones. It is going through a natural disaster where you have no control over anything is really humbling. And especially in a big disaster. We've been through floods in Korea. We experienced the, a 70 or 100-year flood. And in the place that we lived out on the economy up north, they had a 70-year flood or 100-year flood. Flood waters were 4 and 5 feet up on the walls of our place where we lived. Of course, we had to evacuate to higher ground, but that was crazy. I mean, and it hit everybody. It destroyed everything, and then the community really came together. And the other problems with floods is not just the initial flood. Granted, that's a huge problem, but you're talking knockouts of power. You're talking about reduced travel and logistics and delivery of food and emergency services and things like that. Then on top of that, you have floodborne illnesses that come along with that. So everything needs to get cleaned. And then you have, black mold and so on and so forth. So for a country like the Philippines, in a lot of areas that are really poor, getting back to normal is going to be a huge monumental task. And that's with the typhoons, which they average about 19 or 20 typhoons a year, which is absolutely crazy. So for 2024, they had 18. 2023, they had 17. 2022, they had 18. 2021 was 15. So it ranges, around 19 to 20 typhoons a year. And then we start getting these crazy typhoons that really just nail the Philippines. And of course, it goes on and hits Vietnam. So that's kind of an interesting thing as well. Dale says, yep, tremors all over the world. In the UK, I have felt 4 of them. Oh, wow, really? George ended up saying, yeah, but your neighbor to the north is noisy little guy at times. Yeah, he ruffles his feathers and bangs his sabers together. Just makes me wonder how long he's going to be around, and who's the next leader going to be, like his sister or whatever. But yeah, that's something there. Terry says their volcanoes have rumblings and spewing ash lately. Yeah, volcanoes, they have 24 active volcanoes, according to the research that I've done, and they have about 1 or 2 significant events a year. So you're talking about a volcano that's, puts ash into the air, and so like in 2020, they had one. The next year they had one, 2022 they had 2, 2023 they had 1, 2024 they had 3, and it's no trend towards increasing quantity. However, saw slightly more. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing that we end up seeing. So we have volcanoes, we have typhoons, we have earthquakes. We have all those things, and it seems to be pretty steady, but we're seeing a little bit more intensity in those activities as we go on through time, at least looking back in the past 10 years. Yumi Mango says, never to live the stand. The Philippines is a grubby, dirty place. It can be. There are places that are pretty rough. I mean, I would classify it as a third world country, but there's also some very well built and very nice places like BGC, Manila. You have Eastwood City. If you go to these places that are really built up, the infrastructure is really good. Internet is awesome. Healthcare is great. Walkability. You can get anything delivered to your condo or wherever you're living. But that's not the norm. That's, like Yumi said, it's definitely not the norm. And if you go outside of those areas, you'll find a lot of the Philippines is really poor, without a doubt. It is grubby, it is dirty, which is strange because there was a time back in history where the Philippines was rocking it with agricultural and textiles. They had automotives, they were building automotives and things like that. It was really a huge, it was on par to be a really, a great country. But I think corruption came in, and through a series of corrupt leaders and administrations and so on and so forth, it really kept the people down, and it wasn't able to advance like a lot of other countries. So consider Korea. Korea did an outstanding job after the Korean War and where it is now. If you look at Japan and how they advance and things like that, and other countries, just boom, out of the gate. They had nothing. They worked hard. They were dedicated, and they brought up the entire country to levels of that was unexpected, to be honest with you. But with the Philippines, they were on track to do that, but a lot of corruption came in. And unfortunately, that has been a problem as well. Dale says, Yellowstone, if that blows, you're in trouble. Yeah, that could. Yes, that could definitely be a problem. Zombieland says, just listening while I put a pit droid together for a mate of mine. Zombie does a lot of 3D printing and life-size prints, which is really amazing. So George pops up and he says, well, if Yellowstone ever blows, everyone is having a bad time. And to be honest with you, I would have thought something would have happened at Yellowstone sooner. It hasn't happened yet. So there is what it is. Terry pops up and says they had a big one in 1991, Mount Pinatubo, that led the U.S. military leaving. Yeah, that was huge. That was huge. Dale pops up and says, Valentine, personally, I think it's a new ice age. And the world's going to do what it's going to do. You know, just like you have spring, summer, winter, and fall, you're going to have the seasons are cyclical, and you're also going to have the earth that is cyclical and going through cycles of ice ages and times of hot and cold, times of high CO2 and low CO2. So, you know, it is what it is. But it's not like we can stop it. But apparently there's some politicians that think we can tax our way out of these problems. And it's like, no, it's not going to happen. Which begs the question, if climate change and all this stuff is true, and, you know, the oceans are going to rise, and we get that all the time, then why do all the rich, corrupt politicians have beachfront properties? And how can you get insurance on those beachfront properties if all of that was really true? But we won't go there. Because we're going to get back to the corruption. Digging into the corruption of the Philippines. And a lot of countries have their own corruption. The United States is not, it's on a whole new level of corruption when we talk about federal corruptions, state corruption, and things like that. But other countries have their own problems, and the Philippines has its problems as well. So, yeah, taking a look, the Philippines is prone, what is it? Yeah, about 20 typhoons annually. And so they have taken an initiative of getting tax money and investment money and so on and putting millions and billions of dollars into flood control for the Philippines because they got such a bad history, you know, and a typhoon comes through and wipes out villages and towns and cities. And it's like, you just look at it. I mean, you've seen the videos of where everything is gone. You know, the roofs are gone, the walls are partially, just how do you, when you have an entire city that is just decimated, now people don't have a place to live, they don't have restaurants, don't have hospitals, the places where they worked are gone. How do you get back from that? So if I was going to retire in the Philippines, it would be in like BGC, Eastwood City, Manila, some of the really, really built up areas. But with all this, it's really getting hard with the corruption because billions of pesos have been allocated since 2022, but the widespread misuse through ghost projects, overpricing, kickbacks has rendered basically, yeah, it's all for show. And the money went somewhere. Where did the money go? Since President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took office in 2022, approximately 545 billion, which is about 7 billion pounds, I wonder how much that would be in dollar, has been allocated to over 9,855 flood control projects nationwide. But the investigations triggered by Senate probes in mid-2025 revealed that at least 421 of them were ghost projects. In other words, they were reported as completed and done, checks written, money's gone, nothing was built. absolutely zero. So out of 9,855 flood projects, 421 of them were just ghosted. They're ghost projects. Nothing. Just, hey, we're going to build this retaining wall and this floodplain whoozy thing, whatever, and it's never happened ever. That is insane. And this goes all across the country of the Philippines. In Bulacan province alone, which received 4.4 billion pesos in funds, more than any other region, a former district engineer testified that all projects were substandard because 20% or more of the budgets went to kickbacks for lawmakers. Ooh. Terry says, the Marcos family of the Philippines. Imagine that. What are the odds? It is so with all of these things and all these natural disasters and things happen, George gives us a reference. So all you can say is so long and thanks for all the fish. If you know that reference, you are awesome. And you probably read the book and probably saw the movie, and the book was better. Dale pops up and says, shit, dude, the UK's in turmoil. I'll be honest, I used to be a proud citizen, but not so much now. Yeah, I know. I've been seeing a ton of stuff on the UK, and Dale says, sorry, I'm not political, dude. I'm just kind of a common sense guy. Neither right nor left. I just like common sense, and if it makes sense with me and my home budget and how we run our family and, be a good person, that's kind of how, those are my political leanings. Be a good person, use common sense. But yeah, the UK is going through some crazy stuff. The digital ID, all of the immigrants and stuff like that. And I mean, the UK, I've seen the news reports where you can't even fly the UK flag. That's insane. And then people can't walk their dogs through certain neighborhoods because it's offensive and whatever. Oh my gosh. For a country that England ruled the world, and now it is a shell of itself. And so, man, I'm sorry, that's rough. And they have their corruption as well, But back to the Philippines, that 20% of the projects went back to kickbacks for lawmakers. Similar issues surfaced in Cebu, which is pretty bad, where $440 million for flood control was misused, contributing to catastrophic failures during the recent typhoons. Overall estimates suggest 1 trillion pesos may have been lost to corruption in public works over the past 15 years. Corruption mechanisms include siphoning funds via contractors, officials, kickbacks, substandard materials. In an Oriental Mindoro project, a $72.3 million ghost project, and overpriced contracts in La Union, which was $96 million, and Davao Occidental, $179 million. These schemes have also extended to other sectors such as infrastructures, health facilities, but flood control has been the focal point due to the recent disasters. So it has been absolutely crazy what's been going on. And tons of stuff. And, it talks about deaths, and which have gotten up into the last thing that we heard here in Korea is there have been over 300 deaths in the Philippines because of the typhoons. But you have places that you have towns and villages that don't even have electricity. So how do you know who's there or not, or who passed away or didn't? Their infrastructure is not there, so you can't get an accurate number or get people on the ground to find out who's there or who's not. Some places people aren't even registered. So what do you do with that? Yumi Mango says, after you catch some infection, you will think the PI is not so cheap. Yeah, the medical is very different in the Philippines. It is, you have to pay before you can leave. And so it's very important to have medical insurance, things like that, or have the funds to pay for that. And so for somebody like myself, who's a military retiree of the United States Army, the military, my health insurance would I would be able to use that. And there's a number of people who have different types of health insurance that work in the Philippines. But yeah, they're the horror stories that you hear are the people that are poor or don't have a lot of money, the expats that go there that are just scraping by. They have a medical emergency, they go to the hospitals, they can't pay. You can actually go to jail for non-payment of your hospital bills. And again, the quality of care is very different. If you're in BGC or Manila or Eastwood and some of the big cities and stuff like that, you can get some real good medical care. But outside of those big places, matter of fact, there's even in Manila, there's a VA center, Veterans Administration medical clinic there. They don't have one here in Korea, but they have a VA clinic in the Philippines. So yeah, you can get some good care there. But outside of that, just like any other country, if you're not in a big city, the level and quality of care is probably going to go down. And if you're in the provinces, you're probably it's probably rough. It's that's where you start getting into see the old woman at the end of the street and she mixes herbs and leaves and whatever else and dirt together to make a compress to put on your wounds. Or eat this concoction of teas and leaves and whatever, and this is good for your heart disease. Yeah, it's the stories that I've seen and people talking about that and living in the province as far as medical care is really, really lacking. So, yeah. And if you've been to, I haven't been to the Philippines yet, but I've been to Panama and I've been to places in South America that were as equally as poor. And yeah, the medical, yeah, you got to be near a big city. And not only to get away from the poor healthcare, but to have better infrastructure, to be close to hospitals, and of course, better building codes and so on and so forth that can withstand tropical storms, earthquakes, and typhoons, and all that type of stuff. Ferthus, hey, good morning, sir. We're talking about the Philippines and earthquakes and volcanoes, and yeah, oh my. Dale says common sense went out the window years ago, but that applies worldwide also. Yeah, there's a lot of dumb people around. I mean, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm probably more spork level in regards to sharpness, but I'm not a spoon. But yeah, a lot of common sense has gone out the window these days. And with that, we see an increase in corruption and so on and so forth with governments and cities and municipalities and provinces and whatever. And yeah, the Philippines is definitely a place where that's going to be a problem as well. One thing I don't see a lot of people talking about is when you have a third world country and you have the people at the top that they're the elites, they're the lawmakers, the politicians, the rich, the people that get rich off of the people, and you have little to no middle class. When you have such a huge divide between the rich, here's the rich, and then you have the poor, and you have a ton of poor people, you're going to have things like natural disasters, you're going to have corruption, and then eventually, because of the people have been pushed down for so long, and leaders did not work on a plan to grow that country and better the people through jobs and economy and growing the economy and things like that, and eventually it's going to get to a tipping point where the people in the middle class are going to be really, really small. You're going to have a few rich and a lot of poor people. And then you're going to have what we're seeing in the Philippines right now. You got these 2 typhoons that went through, and we're starting to see the corruption that has been going on for the last 10, 15 years in the Philippines. And it's really coming to a head. And how many times have we seen in history where the poor don't have anything to lose? And it is horrible. There's revolts, there's protests, people end up resorting to violence. It is just something that it's a powder keg just waiting for the spark. And that's another thing that is like, Philippines should have been further along in economic growth than where they are right now. But because of the continued corruption and because of no plan for bettering the people, in my opinion, it ends up that, you know, that is a major concern for me when we're talking about the Philippines, in that things aren't getting better. And over time, they haven't been getting better. And now this is all coming to head with the typhoons. And the poor people are eventually, they're just not going to take it anymore. But, you know, you're going to have the politicians that are going to like, oh, they can't eat their dinner. You know, like the Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake. You know, if they're hungry, let them eat cake. You know, if they don't have food for dinner, let them eat cake. You know, that'll take care of everything. You know. Yeah, it was very, very rough, very rough. Terry says Philippine President Rodrigo was arrested by the International Court for all the people he killed during the crackdown on drugs. Oh yeah, he that was like scorched earth policy right there. It's like, yep, I'm taking a hard stand on drugs and drug dealers, and basically send out kill squads to deal with anybody and everybody. Forget due process. It's just kill teams, like Call of Duty kill teams, go out and just decimate anybody. You know, probably were there some people that were innocent? Oh yeah, pretty much guarantee that. But the fact that what he ended up doing is just no regard for the Constitution or laws and just do whatever you want. That shows a huge amount of instability. And so that's another thing that comes into play with, you know, as a backup plan for Korea going to the Philippines, maybe. But for right now, I was going to do that. But thinking this all over and discussing it with wife and everything, and really sitting back and getting the big picture of the Philippines and where it's been and where it's going and where it is now, I don't see enough advancement in the Philippines. And even though the SSRV retirement visas are really, really good, everything else is not so much good. I mean, food's inexpensive and so on and so forth. There's a lot of pros to retiring in the Philippines, but there's a lot of cons. And the other thing that you need to look at is for the long-term stability. And I don't think we're getting the long-term stability in the Philippines like it should have. What we're seeing is kind of reminiscent of what is happening in Thailand. Thailand used to be a really rocking place to go for vacation, retirements, but their government has become really unstable because maybe, like we've talked about here, there's no common sense and there's more corruption, and it's really doing a disservice, and it's hurting the good people of those countries, and it's holding back those economies because of greed, power, corruption, and so on and so forth. So, Nefertamur says, "Greetings, Steve. I'm pleased to hear that you're reconsidering the Philippines as a plan B. So much weather turbulence and corruption. Yeah, political instability and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's yeah. So I don't know what my plan B is going to be. It is definitely." Dale pops up and says, "The way we're going the UK, we're going from a super government to a laughing stock." Yeah, that's rough. Man, I feel for you, bro. That's rough. And then you have other countries that are actively pursuing and tightening their belts. They're looking at their budgets, they're trimming the fat and all those things, and they're really trying to move forward in this world economy that isn't doing real well right now. And one of those places is Japan. So, you know, you've got countries that are taking an active step in bettering their citizens' lives, and then you have other countries that are not. So, yeah. Let's see. Terry says they busted 3 fake call centers run by China in the Philippines last month that were running scams. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that. And now we're getting into global crime and Interpol and the whole 9 yards and the stuff that's going on there. A lot of call centers, scam centers in Thailand, in Philippines, whereas Vietnam is another big one. Laos, Cambodia, a lot of these poor countries are getting a lot. India, it's noted for their call centers, but now they have bad call centers. It is just absolutely crazy on what's going on. So now, crimes that used to be just crimes of that country and its citizens, of now we're seeing an expansion of international crime in countries. And we see the same thing here in Korea. We see the same thing in Japan and so on and so forth. Here in Korea, you'll have people that will come from different countries to set up and basically start crime rings, with drugs and trafficking of different things, including people. And so now more and more resources need to be dedicated to eliminating or combating those things. Whereas, one time Korea just didn't have a drug problem at all. And now it is a rising problem with these international gangs. Dale says, on a positive note, a friend of mine is doing okay in the Philippines, but he went out of the way to be out of it. Yeah. And there's good places in the Philippines. There's good places in Thailand. There's good places in Portugal. And then, Europe, I don't know. I since my wife is Korean ancestry, we're more that's what kind of keeps us in this area. But, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it depends. It really, really depends. But then again, anywhere you retire, you got to have the budget for that. And if you don't have the budget to live in a nice place that has good infrastructure and healthcare and so on and so forth, you might have to do a lot of compromising. Yeah, it's and just retiring overseas, period. There's gonna be culture shock. You got to compromise, and unless you've got a lot of money to live like you did before. And we're talking normal people. If you're rich, God bless you, but I'm not there. But most people, average people, when you retire overseas, you will have to make compromises, guaranteed. So there's that. Terry says, I've gotten texts from the Philippines saying if I don't pay unpaid tolls, I'll be arrested. Get them here in Korea as well. So anytime I get a text, it's the whole thing has popped up with texting and phishing and the whole 9 yards. And, this is your bank, and, your account's going to be frozen. Click this link to reactivate, or your account has been hacked, and so click this link to reset your password. No. I get so many of those. My wife and I get so many of those, it's actually crazy. And the rule that we have made, and some of them look legit, and so our default is to, there's something wrong with my bank account. We go to the bank. And then the bank goes, no, that's not us. That's not us. So, yeah, we have never gotten a text for the bank or whatever, saying, you're going to lose this or that, or you have a fine, or you have a toll, or whatever. All of that will come through the mail. So first of all, there's that. And then anything else you can verify with that individual entity. So the store, the bank, whatever, you can go to them and say, hey, I got this text, see here. No, that's not us, and that's the majority of what it is. Malovmo says, is illegal drug use has increased in Korea? Yeah, unfortunately it has. Malovmo. It has, unfortunately. And Korea is taking an active response in combating that. So it is a thing, and they are dealing with it. They're taking aggressive moves to combat that. But unfortunately, that and alcoholism and a bad economy always seems to rear its ugly head. But with international crimes and gangs, and again, it goes back to kind of immigration, of where you need to have borders and you need to have safeguards for the people that you let into your country. And like I've said in previous videos, countries are finding out that if you don't do the background checks of the people coming into your country, it could have detrimental effects. And it does. Imagine that. and this whole thing for globalization. You got to let these people in, and you have to let them be on welfare. And it's like, no. If somebody from another country comes and wants to come into my country, but you can't support yourself in my country, you don't need to be in my country. And then you'll have people that'll say, oh, well, what about the refugees? We need to take in the refugees. And it's like, you know what? You need to be able to draw a line. That's as simple as it gets, because what I've seen, in my opinion, on a global level, the majority of refugees are not interested. They were not like the refugees back 20, 30 years ago, or 40 years, or 50 years ago. You had people that would leave from religious persecution or physical persecution from other countries, and they would come to the United States. I'll talk about the U.S. because I know about the United States. Hell, my family were immigrants. They came to the United States. But they wanted to make a better life for themselves, and they renounced their citizenship of the old country that they came from, and they became Americans, the melting pot of the world. And for a chance to work hard. There's no guarantees, but you have a chance to work hard and make something for yourself. And, if you've got multiple arrests and this and that, and you got a troubled background, we don't need those people in the United States. I'm just saying, that's what I would do. Because we're under no obligation whatsoever to take in people that hate the United States. In my opinion, that shouldn't be a thing. And I don't think any other country, why would, and again, I look at this as a micro level. If I invite somebody into my house, I'm going to make sure it's somebody that is a good person. It's very rare that we invite people into our home. But if I came home one day and then there was people in my home that I didn't know, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing in my house? And then we find out that these people have been eating our food and doing this and that, and stealing our money or whatever, committing crimes and just trashing the place. You betcha I'm going to throw those people out of my apartment. You're not going to be in my house and act the fool. That's basically what it comes down to. So I think the same thing on a larger scale, a macro scale of a country should have borders and should have rules and so on and so forth. Let's see. Faritha says, my husband gets at least 10 calls a day from Social Security and Medicaid scammers. I know, right? I still get those, even though I'm retired in Korea. I get it on my emails. I don't get anything on my phone because now I have Korean phone service. Everton says, sadly to say the USA is maybe going the way of Rome. UK is described in the book called The Evolution of Civilizations. Yeah, there's always that thing where every civilization only lasts X amount of time, and the United States is on the brink of, hitting that tipping point of where things are going to go bad. So, Dale says, go back in the UK, they had skills that contributed to society. Nowadays, for us, it's easy money. Yeah, and that's another problem. If you go to a country just to get on welfare, you should be, and you're not offering anything back to that country. You're not getting jobs. You're not, leaving your old citizenship behind to become a citizen of the new country that you're in. We've talked about this on a previous video, talking about, how Korea said that they want to give welfare to people from other countries as long as Koreans in those countries get welfare. They will reciprocate that. And it's like, that's a false premise to begin with. If you're a Korean in another country and you cannot survive on your own, you shouldn't be getting welfare from that country. You should be deported back to Korea. Get your collective shit together until you can, if you can't pay, you can't play. So I don't understand. And they say that they want to do that because of globalization and because of, we want fair treatment of Koreans in other countries. Why would you want Koreans to be on welfare in other countries? They should come back to Korea and you take care of your own citizens. But this whole globalization thing is flipped upside down and back to front, and it just doesn't make sense. Malov Mo says the globalization comment is on point. The left-wing people are wrong. They are not all the same and merely interchangeable widgets. Korea has been very selective. Need to take lessons from UK and USA. Yeah, but Korea's got some weird stuff going on too. Like I just talked about, this whole thing about giving welfare to people that aren't Korean citizens. If you can't support yourself in Korea, then you probably need to leave Korea. That's all I'm saying. And I would expect that of any other nation as well, to say the same thing. International law isn't really a thing. It's more like gentleman's agreement between countries. Who enforces international law? That usually happens when a U.S. aircraft carrier shows up. Well, you have Interpol, and international laws and some things like that. But for the most part, I mean, look at Russia, taking over Ukraine or Crimea and Ukraine and stuff like that, and everybody's like, "Oh, Russia's bad," blah blah blah. They shouldn't have invaded and took over Crimea or the war with Ukraine. But there was international treaties that were agreed to by those countries, Russia, Ukraine, Crimea, and all that stuff. And I forget the names of the treaties, but it was international treaties, and they all agreed that if they couldn't have a system of government, and or if like Crimea and Ukraine tried to join NATO, they would have to be reverted back to Russian control. Which all of those countries, everybody that's involved in this agreed to that international thing. So really, is Russia as bad as we think it is, or is it just trying to enforce the treaties that were signed and agreed upon? That's a whole nother ball of wax that comes into when we're talking about a gentleman's agreement. Now a lot of people don't even stand by the agreements that they made. So there's that. George says, true. However, you can only claim asylum at a port of entry or an embassy. Yeah, that's a thing. And asylum can be denied. That's true. But there's also people that have applied for asylum after they've been in the United States, even though they've gotten into the country illegally. Some countries allow that to happen, and past administrations in the United States have totally turned a blind eye. They totally turned a blind eye to a bunch of people that shouldn't be in the United States. When Mexico as a country put out official information to tell citizens how to get out of Mexico, bypass the border controls of the United States to get into the United States, and how to access welfare, that's just wrong. When your own government tells you here's how you can jump the fence, hop the border, swim the creek, whatever it is, in order to leave Mexico and get benefits from the United States, that just shows that Mexico can't even take care of its own people. And so do they really have good leadership? Of course, now it's fraught with cartels and crime and so on and so forth, which is a huge factor there. If you don't bend to the will of the cartels, you'll find yourself hanging off a bridge with various body parts unattached. So it's really, really wrong. But then in the United States, we had, remember when Cuba emptied out its prisons and all of those people came, and there's no way to verify, but they were allowed in the United States and in crime sprees and that brings to mind the movie Scarface with Al Pacino when he was young. That was kind of a wild movie. But, those things happen. And when you have countries that send refugees and you have no way of verifying who these people are, and then later on you find out that, wait a second, that country of which they came from and emptied out their prisons, their mental institutions, and sent their undesirables into your country, that you should learn a lesson from that. But apparently a lot of countries have not, and they keep doing that. So, I don't know. Welcome to the UK. Yeah, yep, I know. Ferrithus pops up and says, the free market has created a corporate globalized world. Nothing you can do about that. If countries won't work together in a globalized manner, you'll have corporations making this decision soon. Yeah, and it makes you wonder if there's more behind the scenes. Kind of like in The Wizard of Oz, you have the guy behind the curtain. I think there's people behind the curtain that are pulling the strings and doing a lot of stuff. And again, they're the elites. They have tons of money, people like Soros. You have the international banking cartels. Don't get me started on debt and you'll never pay off the debt of countries, that is never meant to be paid off, and it can't be paid off. So there's that's a whole nother dark hole to go down. But it's just, don't get me started. Indeed, the concerns regarding Russia and the agreements signed are valid. It is reassuring to have someone else who is well informed on this matter. Well, I try. Like I said, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm a spork, but I can read and do some stuff. And I think part of that has to do because in school, we're taught history. And so kind of a little bit of a history buff, not as much as I used to be. But yeah, I guess maybe us older people just don't have TikTok brain anymore, or don't have TikTok brain, period. Whereas the younger generations, if it's not on TikTok, they don't care. If it's not on social media within a 5 or 10-second cat or dog video or little, whatever thing, dance and whatever to music, and people don't care about that stuff anymore. They don't care about history. They don't care about international trade or the agreements and things like that have gone on, or even how their money system works. Hell, we don't even teach people how to have a budget in their own home. Just absolutely crazy. Let's see. Yes, there have been some pamphlets circulating in rural areas in China about how to apply for welfare benefits in the USA. I think Korea needs to be very selective and not incentivize foreign poor. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it should be with every country. But some countries, they're just dumping their poor and useless and criminals into other countries under the guise of, we'll just tell them you're being persecuted, and they can seek asylum and they'll take you. And people don't really want to. They want their old system of government and identity. They don't want to become U.S. citizens. And that's a problem compared to what the United States used to be a long time ago. I mean, hell, my own family were immigrants. We came from Europe and Germany and those areas there. Got a lot of German ancestry. But we understood that we wanted to leave those countries and have a better opportunity. Not a guarantee. We just wanted a better opportunity. And, they, do some background checks and you had to, hey, I don't want to be a citizen of that country. I want to be a U.S. citizen. And given that opportunity is a great privilege. Now, they don't really do that much. Dale says, it depends on which countries subscribe to the Human Rights Court. Sadly, not everybody does that. Yeah, and then when you have places like the UN, where that's a whole joke in and of itself, when you have people that are in charge of terrorism, who's-he, what's-he, or whatever, and the person that got appointed to that comes from a country that is actively involved in terrorism. Just like, what? How is that even possible? Absolutely crazy. And then the fact that the UN doesn't follow or enforce their own things that they got going on, or the thing with Russia and the Ukraine and Crimea and things like that, and how they're so against, even though they themselves have agreed to that as well. It's all just jockeying for position. George pops up and says, unfortunately, we have to witness the Tide Pod generation rise to power. Yep. The Tide Pod generation. Everything must be free. Everything must be free. You need to house me for free. You need to feed me for free. You need to pay for my education and my tuition that is woefully exploded into amounts that are insane, with a degree that there's no way I can get a job in whatsoever. You need to pay for that. It's like, no, that's not how the world works. People that don't have a budget, that are in debt, that go through bankruptcy and foreclosure and have no shame in it whatsoever, that don't care if they're on welfare, that welfare is a job in and of itself of skirting the system. And it's disgusting. When you end up being an individual like that, you're really, I mean, it's just sad to see how the human condition has reduced itself to positions like that. And it's just, the Maslow hierarchy of needs thing is we're so far away from that. There's like the bottom of the pyramid, and then you get up to the self-actualization at the top and the whole 9 yards. I think we're digging a hole down from the pyramid in that aspect. So yeah, the Tide Pod generation is not very good. So anyway, yeah, rethinking retiring in the Philippines. Definitely rethinking that. It's still a possibility, but we're just kind of putting it on hold. I think we're going to go and we'll do a vacation. I'm glad we didn't do a vacation there during this time frame. We did go to Vietnam. For those of you who don't know, we went to Vietnam a little while ago. We went to Hanoi and then we went to Sapa, which was we had an awesome time. So thankfully we didn't get, we weren't there during the time of these typhoons because that would have been miserable. Or the Philippines. We thought about going to the Philippines, but obviously our Philippine vacation is going to be pushed back. And of course the SRRB visa thing that we wanted to do, we're going to kind of put a hold on that and wait and see what goes on with the government. Because with all of this corruption and the billions and billions of dollars, it wouldn't surprise me. It'd just take a little spark for that powder keg to go off, and I think you'll see people rioting and looting, even though there's nothing to loot now. But they're going to go after the politicians, they're going to go after the corrupt officials, and so on and so forth, and that could get super ugly. And that could be quick, fast, and in a hurry. And so we're kind of holding off on doing the SSRB. Now, if I could apply for the SSRB and not have to go to the Philippines for 2 months, maybe. But even then, the instability, the natural disasters, that is a concern. But it's more the government instability and such the huge difference between the elite and the poor. You got a ton of poor people and you got the elites, and the middle class is a shrinking middle class. And there's no set plan or strategy to improve the people of the Philippines, who are awesome people. So, I don't know. Faritha says, oh, the younger generation, screams in an old man voice. It says, LOL, every generation ever. That is true. That is true. But you got to admit, that is absolutely true. But you got to admit, back in the day, we didn't eat Tide Pods. We were stupid. I will confess, I have done lots of stupid in my life, but not the level of stupid that we're seeing today, which is insane. But that's kind of younger generations, those whippersnappers. We were never like that. Just get a job and work. And yeah, that's funny. I like it. Terry says the typhoon that hit the Philippines is heading for Vietnam. Yeah, the previous one hit Vietnam, and now this one that hit the Philippines, the Yuan, that's going to hit towards Vietnam as well. So, yeah, that they're going to get a pounding as well. But I think the Philippines is going to get it worse. But either way, you look at the average income for a Filipino is like $200, maybe $250. And I did some search on Vietnam because we went on vacation there. I wanted to see, what it's communist and what's the average income. It's around $250 to $300, which is around that same level. And in the bigger cities, it's kind of like the Philippines. Great, big, good infrastructure, a lot of tourism, so on and so forth. But outside of that, it's really an agricultural society, and there's a lot of poor people. But the people we've met in Vietnam were great, and the Filipinos that we've met in our travels and that we know here in Korea, they're great people as well, So, I think there's a lot of countries that maybe they have a plan to improve the economy and improve the citizens and the wealth of their citizens and the well-being, but I don't think that they're going fast enough. And then when you start getting into corruption that is robbing those people, robbing them of good education and good economic development and to make a better life for themselves, that corruption just, that can create, that's the powder. That's the powder keg right there. That's the gunpowder. It just needs a little spark. So, mini civil war, maybe? I don't know. What was that place in, I don't know, it was some other world country where the people just raided the Capitol and I think they burned the, I don't know, the president or prime minister or whatever alive and whatever, beat his wife up or whatever. It's just an insane amount of stuff. Then you have South Africa, and what is it? That they ended up, like killing all the white South Africans and they took over places, and then now it's just like a shithole because nobody knows how to do the jobs or whatever. I mean, I don't know. It's just a crazy time that we're alive. Ferrith says, back in the day, you could also support a full family on a single factory worker income. It's uncharted territory. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a two-family income world that we live in the United States anyway. For a long time, there's many years of which I was in the military that we qualified for food stamps. I hated that. I was ashamed to do that. I would work side jobs, second jobs while I was in the military. But then after a while, it got to the point of where I was making enough money and my wife stayed home. We were a single income family. Well, not single income because I was making other money, but I was allowed my wife to stay home to raise our daughter, and that was invaluable. But yeah, the days of being able to do that are basically non-existent now. And to some extent, it was, you look back on the immigrants that came to the United States in many, many years ago. They couldn't afford housing. They couldn't do these things. But so you had in families that had 1, 2, or 3 generations living in the same household. They all had jobs. They all contributed and put their money in the till. And then they bought a business. They bought a restaurant. They did dry cleaners or whatever. And then they worked their tails off. And then they were able to make a better lives for themselves. Kind of similar to what we end up seeing in Hawaii. We lived in Oahu for over a year. And that was insane because the price of everything in real estate, the locals and the Hawaiians, the nationals, original Hawaiian people are being priced out of Hawaii. They can't afford it. So you have multiple generations living in houses trying to survive off of minimum wage jobs and off of the tourism, which thankfully it's kind of a double-edged sword. Tourism has risen prices, and of course now rich people want to buy houses and condos in Hawaii, and it ends up that's bad because now the prices go up, but the minimum wage workers, and they get a little bit more, but it ends up now they can't afford the housing, and so they're priced out of their own country of where they were born in. There's so many Hawaiians that are leaving Hawaii to go to Las Vegas and other places that there's very little Hawaiians left. And I think that's a disservice. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. But people did what they had to do to get ahead. And I think there's something to be said that the new generation these days, they don't want to think outside the box in ways in which, you're going to have to make some sacrifices now and be able to reap some benefits later. Most of them don't care. Most of them are TikTok brain rot. And, they charge their credit cards, get more credit cards, we'll max those out. Well, as long as I can, have my best life now, YOLO, the whole 9 yards. They don't care about retirement. They don't care about the end. They don't care about any of these things. And while it is, like Faritha says, it is hard, way harder than what it was when I was growing up, you still got a lot of people that just don't want to work, period. And that's problematic. You get, how many times have we seen stories and reports of people that are in their 20s, 30s, and now even 40s that have been living at home that don't work because they're sponging off of mom and dad. Well, what happens when mom and dad leave and you don't have anything? You don't know how to do a budget. You can't take care of yourself. Your parents have done everything for you, and when they pass away, you're going to have to do those things on your own. A lot of people are going to, it's going to hurt. Reality's going to bite them. Let's say, George says, Darwin may have claimed many of my generation, but the Tide Pod generation has him overworked. Dale says it's all about the money. Yeah, I think so. Dale says, respect to you, sir. Stand up and salute. Well, thank you. Respect to you as well. Terry says, the immigrants that came to America had to work because there was no welfare until 1964. Yeah. So it was required. There was no guarantee. There was just the opportunity. And if you look back then, even there was no guarantees. Even if you look back at Social Security, when Social Security started, what was the life expectancy back at the time when Social Security started? It was really high, but now we have Social Security. You can start drawing that at age 62. I'm 59. I'm going to start drawing mine at 62. But now you have people that are living into their 70s and 80, 85 and things like that. So I don't agree with Social Security to begin with. That's a whole corrupt Ponzi scheme, government scheme system anyway, that should be replaced with putting money into the market and you get a better return. And, we beat that dead dog to death. But, yeah, the whole thing, there wasn't even Social Security back then. Yeah. No welfare until 1964. Nefertum says, reflecting on military pay and compensation during our era, it is indeed a matter of concern. Yeah. Faritha says, I don't know. Most Gen Xers I know are loaded up on credit card debt and still have student loans in their late 40s, while the millennials I know are doing pretty good. Yeah. And we're comfortable. We're able to retire overseas, and retiring overseas allowed us to retire early. I'm not making big bank, but we're comfortable. I've never bought a new car in my life, ever. It's always been old. It's always been, we never financed a car. We had to make hard decisions and pay with cash and so on and so forth. There was times where we did have credit card debt that got out from under us, and then we reeled it back in and we started making smart decisions. But a lot of people these days, they don't do that. And they don't care about the credit card debt. Oh, I'll just file bankruptcy. I'll just file foreclosure or whatever. They don't care. As long as I get my handbags or my bass boat or whatever it is, that they want, or the endless stream of never-ending Starbucks drinks, and just charge it. They don't care about retirement. And so they're going to have to rely on Social Security, which is going away. It's going to be insolvent by 2034, which is, I'll have drawn Social Security for 6 years at that point. And then unless they raise the Social Security age limit on when you can start drawing, which I totally think they will do, I think, I don't know, 65, maybe even 70. I think probably 65. Instead of being able to draw at 62, I think it'll be like 65 or 67 will be the minimum time that you can start, and then they'll just up everything. Where full payment was 70, I think maybe they'll even pop that up to 72 or 75 years old, because the system is not sustainable. Veritha says, very much subjective impression that today's generation can't do money, I would say. Seeing what, our daughter is in her 30s, and just going through, when my wife and I went through school, you learned how to do a budget. You learned about money. You learned about finance. You learned about, social studies, home economics classes, so on and so forth. How to take care of yourself. I remember all those things. Our daughter went through school, even though that she went to some pretty good schools, they didn't have that. And so, I remember going through school where we had situations where, okay, come up with a business, or make a business. You want to sell something to learn how to do the profit and loss statements and all that stuff, so you get kind of a general idea of how businesses work and budgeting for businesses. I remember going through that. Nowadays, nothing, nothing. And if you don't teach them how that's an opportunity of something that they can do, is to be a business owner instead of an employee, you're doing a disservice to your citizens, unfortunately. And the majority, and the other reason I know it's not, it is subjective, because I'm basing a lot of this on my personal experience. I spent over 20 years in the military, and during that time, I had thousands of soldiers underneath me, definitely hundreds, that I would have to counsel, and people, I would say the majority of them, didn't know how to do a budget. They couldn't write checks. They couldn't do a budget. I can't tell you the number of times that I had soldiers that worked for me that were outstanding soldiers, didn't understand that, well, I have a limit on my credit card. So I just keep spending more until I hit that limit. And they thought that, and of course they don't read the terms of the contract of the credit card, and so it's like the minimum payment, they would never pay that off essentially. And it's like they didn't know how to do that. That was the majority of my time in the military, of teaching soldiers, was teaching soldiers how to budget. And that was during my time frame. And now when my daughter goes through school, none of that is being taught. No budget, no home ec, no nothing. And, she's a younger generation. And then the kids that she sees as a doctor and stuff like that, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of dumb people, So you can't figure out how to do your own budget. If you can't figure out simple interest on a credit card or a mortgage or whatever, a car loan or whatever, kids these days, most of the kids, I would say, based on my subjective experience, they can't do it like we could back in my time, or even my daughter. Of course, I had to teach my daughter how to do that stuff. Let's see. Dale says, about to hit 50 in February. I'm okay. I can hold my own, dude. I did okay. Everyone says, I'm grateful for my father entrusted me with the responsibility of learning financial literacy, and has been proven to be a valuable asset in my life. Yeah. You want to change your kid's legacy? Teach them financial literature or financial literacy. Terry says, from 1900 until the 40s, companies would take advantage of immigrants by providing company housing and a company store that came out of their check, keeping the debt to the company. Yeah. Yep, there's definitely that. Faritha says, I'm a millennial. I've taught plenty of Gen Xers how to use spreadsheets and how to do a simple budget, so I can't vouch previous generations were any better about budgeting. I can. It was taught in school. It was taught. You had to pass. It was a requirement, So everybody got taught that. So were there still stupid people that wouldn't budget their money? Or absolutely, but not on the grandiose scale that we have today. Absolutely crazy. So and it shows, because if you look at business registrations and so on and so forth, and the breakdown of how many people start businesses, by age brackets and generation and so on and so forth. Those are some variables that you can look at, and some stats that you can look at and say, yeah, we're not doing that as much as we used to. But then on the other side of the coin, you could say, well, we don't have a lot of businesses to start. But then again, there's a lot of businesses, things that people get paid to do that you had no clue you could do during my generation. It's just insane. So the job market and businesses has changed and evolved over time, and it's gotten a lot easier, I think, in my opinion. Being able to start a business and make money is not as time and labor expensive, physical labor expensive, as it used to be. Terry says, we had economic classes in the old days. Right? Yeah. Not only did you learn about your government and how the government did their budgets and so on and so forth, and how things worked in government. You learned how to do your personal finances. You learned how to do business stuff, and yeah, it was just kind of a thing. Come up with a product idea and how much it would sell, and here's the teacher would interact with you. This is your customer base and whatever. Figure out, and if you don't have enough money, you're going to apply for a small business loan, and you have to figure out the interest and figure out well, am I going to be in the red? Am I going to be in the black? How's that going to affect in product pricing and so on and so forth? Yeah, there was all of that. No more. But now we teach people that you can use any bathroom you want, but they can't do a budget to save their life or follow it. That's the big thing. So, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting on what's going on in the world today. Definitely interesting. And as I said in some previous videos, you see things like the Dave Ramsey. I went through the Dave Ramsey thing. I have one minor, I have a few things I don't agree with Dave Ramsey on some things, the use of credit cards and so on and so forth. He says absolutely verboten, don't ever, it is, stats show that you'll spend more money if you use a credit card. And it's like, no, maybe for a lot of people, but if you're disciplined, I mean, we use our credit cards, but our budget for food and so on and so forth hasn't changed than when we use cash. And we set a level. It's just, some stuff is a little outdated with him. And then the air miles that we got and free plane tickets, that paid for itself. And we never carry a balance. We pay it off, so we don't pay interest, but we take advantage of those things. So, but you see people like Dave Ramsey talking to, to people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s, people that have racked up obscene amounts of debt and that they're absolutely clueless. And the immediate gratification is more important than preparing for their future. And that is going to hit hard and fast with people who they think, oh, well, I'll just, I always got Social Security. You think you're always going to have Social Security? That's a good one. That is a good one. I mean, how many things in life have we, that we thought was going to be forever, and those things changed? And you need to be malleable. You need to be able to, shift and adjust and move and plan for, hope for the best and plan for the worst is what it comes down to. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't even want to do that these days. And it's just not with, it's just not with the United States either. Korea is a huge consumer nation, and their debts have gone up. Personal debts and credit cards and so on and so forth. How many times? They've got to have the new phones, the new cars, new clothes, the new designer handbags. You got to get your kids into a good school, and you got to look the part to be the part. So you got to spend a ton of money, and it's like have your best life now, and you have a ton of people that are going to rely solely on the pension system of Korea, and it's like, but you look at other countries, you're not going to be able to rely on those as much because they're not going to grow at the same speed of the cost of living, but yet these people are just like, no, they have 100,000, 200,000 won. Shirt, or spend a few $100s on clothes, or a $3,000 or $4,000 handbag that they use a few times and then it sits in the closet, and then they complain that they don't have any money saved for retirement. It's like, hey, remember those 10 or 15 bags that you bought? You could have put in. Yeah, that's the thing. So Korea is not. They have the same problems as well as the United States. Keeping up with the Joneses, or should I say, keeping up with the Kims. The Ferdum says, I concur with my disagreement regarding Dave Ramsey's advice on credit cards. I mean, I'm not saying there's some people that can't handle credit cards. And so it's like some people can't handle their liquor. So they shouldn't drink at all, period. Yeah, same thing with credit cards. Some people just can't handle credit cards, and that's probably good advice for them. But to say that whenever somebody says always, You'll always spend more money on a credit card than if you set a budget, and use cash in the envelopes and envelopes for this and this and this and food and this, and have your $300 for food, and once you spent that, you can't spend it anymore. I'm a mature adult. If my budget is X amount for food, whether it's in physical dollars or on a credit card, that's the budget. If other people are so undisciplined that they can't do that, then yeah, don't use credit cards. Go back to the envelope thing. Here's the money for the food. Here's the money for this and this and this. And once you run out of the money in that envelope, then work with that. Use what works. But when he says stuff like you'll always, that's stereotyping. It's a generalization because there's a number of people, and you only need one person to disprove what he says. And we've done that. A number of other people have done that as well. They have a budget set for food and entertainment and this and that, and apps are a thing. Boom. It's just. I think he's a little old school, which is nothing wrong with that. Let's see what else. Max says, like you said earlier, they encourage you to get in debt. Then you're in a cycle. They make it easy. Yeah. And student loans, oh, good Lord, for degrees where you can't get jobs after you get the degree, under the guise of education is always good, to find yourself or, whatever, feel good thing that they got going on. Yeah. But nobody can read the terms of the loan. And we talked about, like, my last, one of my prior bosses, yeah, he had a student loan debt, paying minimum payments, wasn't getting anywhere, and then he had multiple, and they rolled it all into one, and then he made minimum payments for 10 years, and he owed more than what he came in and when he rolled those things in, because he was making the minimum payments because he didn't read the terms of the agreement or the interest rate, which tacked on more towards the principal, and he would never pay it off. So, yeah, and he's my age. So there's idiots everywhere. Dale says, if you can't repay, don't play. Yep. George says, credit cards have their place. I use mine to buy gas for the car and pay it off by the end of the month. Same here. Yep. For example, the Dave Ramsey, don't ever use credit card. I get what he's saying, and I totally agree with him. But if you can't use it responsibly, then don't use it. We've got a credit card to where we get, I think it's like 10% off food purchases when we're at the military base in the food court, which we normally would get food anyway, whether we paid cash or use a credit card. But we got this credit card specifically for purchases at the food court because we get a 10% discount. And then we pay it off every single month. I'll take a 10% discount all day long. And in Wednesdays, the salads and stuff like that there's like $2 off on those already on Wednesdays, and then take another 10% off. Yeah, you just need to make smart financial decisions. So saying that, never have a credit card, that's wrong. And you've heard him. If you haven't heard Dave Ramsey, he's talked to people, and people with same views as myself, he just berates them. How dare you borrow, And it's like, if you're undisciplined, then yeah, don't use credit cards. But if you can use them responsibly, I don't see what the deal is, It's like a hammer. You can use a hammer to hit yourself, or you can use it to build something. Anyway. Yep, credit cards have their use. And that's what we do. We pay it off every single month. We don't carry any balance whatsoever. So we get points, we get awards, we get the discount on the food and so on and so forth. We take advantage of that stuff. We used to have a lot of credit cards. Now we have minimal cards. And yeah, we don't have a problem with our budget or anything else. We're still saving money during retirement. There's that. So yeah, it never stops. But today's people, not so much. Then the question comes up, have you observed the recent increase in annual credit card fees? Chase? No, I haven't, because we pay ours off and we don't have any fees on ours. So I haven't noticed that, but now I'll check that to make sure. Dale pops in and says, took me nearly 10 years to repay my student loan. I benefited from it, sort of. I went self-employed and went into a different direction. Don't forget I'm in the UK, so different terms. Cool. Congratulations. Terry said, I worked with a finance company from 77 to 81, and a corporation loan are the biggest scam. Consolidation loans are the biggest scams. Yeah, that is huge. Here's a story. When we were in the United States in Colorado, there's another guy named Wilson. My name's Steve Wilson. I forget his first name. It's just because he was a doctor. So it's Dr. Wilson. And he was a good guy. He had been a doctor. And of course, he had student loans. And I remember one time we go to church and it ends up Dr. Wilson is extremely happy. We're in a parking lot. We were walking and going towards a sanctuary, and it ends up it's like he was extremely happy. And it's like, holy crow. I mean, it was so much that it's like, talk, hey, good morning, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he's just grinning from ear to ear. And it's like, dude, what, why are you so happy? I mean, he's normally, pretty decently happy individual, but this was like over the top, overflowing. And he's like, man, he says, I just paid off my student loan. And I'm like, whoa, incredible. Yeah. And this was like 30 some odd years. In other words, on the same amount of term as a house mortgage, paid it off. Finally, after 30 years. So he went to he got a loan. He had his pre-med, and I think he had a loan for that. And then he went to medical school, and of course, that took loans. And then he became a doctor. There's that whole thing. And then he had, it was like 30 years. 30 some odd years. I'll just say it was 30 because I can't remember. But I know it was at least 30 years. He finally paid it off, and it's like, holy crow, that is insane. 30 years on that. And so now he's making big money, because he doesn't have the student loans anymore. But it's just amazing on how long you have to pay on that. Compared to my daughter, she got full ride scholarship. She got a degree. She got an associate's degree before she graduated high school. I get to brag on my daughter now. And then she got a full ride scholarship in Colorado for her pre-med. And then she got the military doctor medical school will pay, and when you become a doctor, you're in the Army and do 8 years for us thing. And so now she has no student loan debt for being a doctor. And matter of fact, she's here stationed at Camp Humphreys. And so, boom. If she stays in, fine. But she's looking at getting out, and she won't have any medical school debt whatsoever. So that'll be huge. Basically, you're looking at the largest expense that you have is going to be your housing. But if you're like a doctor and a professional and stuff like that, that's about the same price. It might be housing is higher, and then the next highest thing that you pay is going to be your student loans. And those interest rates are absolutely insane. And some of those, if you don't pay on your student loans, they can limit the amount of jobs that you can have access to. And when it comes to being a doctor, oh, good Lord, that's even worse. And how that whole student loan thing came into play, that's just crazy. And, it's insane. So the good thing is that, there are ways in which people can get educated. Either you be smart, you can get grants, you can get scholarships. There's ways in which you can get, medical school or higher level education paid for by like doing the military or things like that. Trading, some time that you have to spend working for the government for them to pay off your student loans and things like that and debt. Do that. But nobody wants to do that. And it's just, people don't even want to go after grants. They don't want to apply for grants. They just want their education paid for by somebody else, or just put it on a student loan and they don't even care. thankfully, the school that my daughter went to during high school, it was a private school. Well, it wasn't really private. It was a charter school. And we had to drive her every day to go there. My wife did. But they focused on applying for every single grant, money, whatever it is, scholarship. That was where they super excelled. And they did early college in high school. If you're, had applied yourself and were at that level. But compared to public schools, nothing. They did not take a vested interest in the public schools that we were at of doing anything like that. And where the charter school, which we had the opportunity to go to, that, they pushed it. They made people apply for scholarships and grants, even if they said they didn't want to go to college, because some kids changed their mind. And so, thankfully, there were some kids that didn't take advantage of that and said, "Yeah, you got a scholarship, you got grant money," and they're like, "No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to college." Then that's fine. But then there was a number of kids that were like, "No, I don't want to go to college," and then it came time to graduate, and they ended up getting scholarships, and they took advantage of those things. But they were basically forced to apply, which was a good thing. So. Talking about the credit card usage fees, not the interest. Card travel usage fees, not interest. Okay, I'll check that out. Thank you. Appreciate that. Dale says we have to earn over $29K before they start taking repayments. So imagine the interest you occur over time if you don't start paying early. Yeah. And then there's some of those loans, some of the consolidation loans, there's a little stipulation that says no prepayment. So in other words, you're going to pay that interest where very little goes to the principal, and you're going to pay a bunch of interest, but you can't pay additional onto the principal to pay it off sooner. Yeah, that's a thing. Which is insane. Dale says, apparently for us, it pays to get into education. Not. Yeah. Terry says they wrote the law for student loans to where you can't get them discharged through bankruptcy. That's true. That was a whole thing. Whole thing in the United States is that the lobbyists and the deals that the politicians made with the banks and so on and so forth. It's like if you give the politicians money, we get you elected. You're going to pay, Get somebody at our door. Oh, okay. It's for spraying disinfectant in the drains and stuff like that in the apartment. That's part of things we get. I was wondering what that was. It's like, we don't get anything. Let's see. Ferrith says, I studied in Germany, got 5,000 or 500 a month in student loans, did everything I could to throw 1,000 at it a month once I had a job, paid it off after 3 years. Awesome. That is incredible. Was very thankful that they took out the interest from my monthly payments when I got the loan, and that university is heavily subsidized in Germany because an educated populace is good. Yes, absolutely. And the hard work and dedication and understanding, of how loans work and stuff like that, and you decided to make a conscious effort to pay that off early and take an active role in that is awesome. That, again, good people on this stream. Incredible. The Ferritum says, indeed, student loans constitute a significant surplus on the United States balance sheets. Yeah. There's student loans. They're absolutely crazy. And how that ever passed was insane. And I'm not averse to having student loans, because like Ferrithus, you get your education and you get a job and you know that you're going into a field that is going to pay so that you could repay that student loan, through future employment with that degree or education that you got. But nowadays, we've got, at least in the United States, I don't know about Germany, But you can get degrees in anything and everything that have zero job opportunities after you graduate. So it's like, nope, 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 nope. And yeah, like Terry says, I can't write them off on bankruptcy. They're just like an albatross around your neck. Matter of fact, talking about an albatross, when I talked about my old boss, he had been married a few times. And part of the agreements in the divorce settlement is that he took on some of the college debt that the spouse that he had at that time, he was responsible for some of those things. And so that added to, you know, his student loans and so on and so forth. And so that was transferred over to him, which is insane. It shouldn't be a thing either. But yeah, you can't write that stuff off. It is totally impossible to do that. So, and then that whole debacle of him just paying the minimum payments after he consolidated all that stuff for 10 years and it grew, the principal grew because it added interest. It was insane. And it's, yeah, we really kind of ragged on him with that. Terry says, I have a friend, his son got out of the Navy and got his engineering degree using his GI Bill. Oh, yeah. That's the college options. And even if you just go into the military, I did 20 years. I didn't want to do college. I hated school if I knew what I was doing and you could explain why I was learning that, then I would love it and do it. And I would do real well. But the problem is, if you couldn't explain to me why I needed calculus and so on and so forth, or algebra or whatever, and it's just to check the block just to graduate, yeah, I would rebel and say, no, I'm not going to do this. That was crazy. But with that, going into the military, you can get money for college. So yeah, you sacrifice X amount of years of your life, but you get 2 or 3 years worth of college, or whatever it is, using your GI Bill. You can get like up to 4 years. But here's the kicker: while I was in the military, I still went to college on Pell Grants, got free classes, sometimes free books, and I was able to get 3+ years of college while I was in the military, basically free. So, there's ways to do that. But a lot of people don't want to be in the military for whatever reason. I get that. But there are ways in which you can get an education and better yourself and better your family. But a lot of people just don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to sacrifice anything. They want all the good stuff now without any self-sacrifice, unfortunately. So, but yeah, like I said, Terry says a friend, his son got out and got his degree using the GI Bill, and then there's people like my daughter who got her medical school paid for by the military in exchange for doing 8 years. So that's $250,000, $300,000, and they gave her a living stipend to boot, and paid for books and lab fees and all that stuff. So Dale says similar thing in the UK. Really? Oh, cool. That's good. Nefertum says, I heard that children of 100% disabled veterans are authorized pre-education. What a great deal. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of things out there, especially for disabled veterans as well. That's really good. Yeah. I mean, the education is out there. But what education you get seems to be the question. And you need to do the thing of where it's like, okay, if I get this degree in underwater basket weaving with a minor in gender studies, is there a job on the other side when I graduate so that I can pay back this loan? If there is a good paying job, then great, do that. If that's, but if there's not, probably wouldn't be a good idea to get that underwater basket weaving degree. That's all. Terry says, if you don't use all your GI Bill, you can give that to your kids. Yeah, they made that a thing. Fortunately, I didn't get that. I was too late for that. But then again, everything worked out for her anyway. Free education. Yeah, there's free education out there. There's so many grants. You got the Pell Grants, you got scholarships, you got pretty much, there's so much money that is left on the table for grants and monies for college that is just insane, that never gets used because schools nowadays don't investigate any of that stuff. So, let's see, what do we got going on? Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff that people can do, but just nobody wants to take advantage of that stuff. Or even worse, the schools don't even tell their kids or teach their kids how to apply for grants or anything like that. Or tell them that trade schools here, you can be an electrician, you can make $60 an hour, you can be a heavy equipment operator, and yeah, driving big trucks and all that stuff and make $40 an hour. Listening to your headphones and driving and doing concrete work or asphalt, and you're making $40 an hour or more, or be an electrician or a plumber or any of the industrial trades. All of those things are woefully short, and they're paying some seriously good coin. But people don't want to work, They don't want to take advantage of that. And I think part of the problem is we focus so much on other things in education that are not necessities, and they're the small things that we decide the small things are more important than the big important things. And we're only doing a disservice to our kids and the future generations. So, but yeah, there's education out there to be had, and it can be free. Like I said, my daughter's education was paid for, and she got a living stipend. So crazy. Dale says, unless you want to go to Sri Lanka to collect tea leaves, basket weaving will go a long way. Sorry if anyone is watching from Sri Lanka. Yeah. But yeah, there should be a thing of, can you get a job on the other side? And most younger people today don't even consider that as a thing. Like I said, I got turned on to the Caleb Hammer YouTube guy doing the finances for people. They agree to come on, and there was the one lady who got the 4-year degree in Chicano studies to get in touch with her roots. Well, what job can you get after that? With that, you can't. Again, the Goodwill Hunting thing, you could have got the same education with a library card and a few dollars in late fees. Adam Bob, hey, turn in late. Good morning. Good day. We're talking about you and the other Adam. Wondering if you're going to show up today. So hey, good to have you aboard. We're just about to call this one, but yeah, some very, very interesting stuff. And while, I do need to acknowledge that it's harder for younger generations now to get ahead than what it was during our time. Of course, we didn't have, prices of housing were less expensive. Minimum wage was less expensive, but the expenses weren't as high as, compared over to what we have today. But then again, back then, you didn't have as many opportunities for free education or grants or scholarships or, and the scholarships that you had back then, there was so much competition because they concentrated on the areas that would have good job possibilities on the other side of graduation, that they wanted the best and the brightest. And so there's limited scholarships. Well, now we have scholarships out the wazoo for pretty much any race, creed, gender, age, whatever it is, ethnicity. You can find grants and scholarships and the whole 9 yards, but nobody applies for them, and that money just kind of goes away. You need to take advantage of it while you can. Terry says, we had technology classes when I was in high school, and companies in town would hire students part-time. I remember that. Yeah, you would have a school work program to where you could actually do stuff like that. And some of those were like trades-related type of jobs. Some of them are just, part-time school, part-time job, exactly like what Terry said. And we don't have that stuff anymore. We're not preparing our students, our citizens, our future citizens and future leaders to have a budget, or they don't even know how to work. It's so offensive for people to work these days. They just want everything on a platter, and when you have generational welfare recipients that teach their kids and their kids' on how to abuse the system to get welfare so they don't have to work. There's something inherently wrong with that. I mean, if you're disabled and you need it, or you're poor, or whatever it is, you fall on hard times, I totally get we should have welfare. But it is so overused. Dale says, my first mortgage on my house was £96. Nowadays, you can add 500 onto that for the same house. Yeah. My very first house was $60,000. $60,000. And that was in the early 1990s. Brand new house. 60 grand. And then keeps going up. When we sold our house, it was $400,000, something like that. It was some, not the same house, but that makes me wonder how much, because I remember the address of the house. That's the funny thing. So let me see if I can pull up that house, because we bought it for $60,000. Oh, come on, seriously? It was 442 Newman Drive, Clarksville, Tennessee, 37042. There's our house. Holy crow, there's the house. Y'all got to take a look at this. This is it. This was the house. This was the very first house that we bought. It was $60,000. Wow. $230,000. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,100 square feet. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, around 100 home value. Back in 2016 was 90,000. Oh, that's the house. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, that brings back so many memories. Wow. Of course, obviously they updated everything, but that was, oh, look at that. It's got that's the backyard, totally the backyard. And over to the right-hand side, on the right-hand side, there wasn't as many houses. There was a few more houses when you went down that way, but it ends up there was a big farm and there was houses or a farm and a horse. Wow. $230,000 versus the $60,000 that it is now. Yeah, very Barney Basic. I wish we held on to that house. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Nothing special. I mean, just house and boom, there it is. I remember mowing the grass. That was it. That is so cool. Yeah, but yeah, $230,000. That's what it is now. Estimated market value $238,000. So that's kind of cool. Wow, amazing. Let's see. First mortgage. Okay, we did that. Fairtha says, bought my house just before COVID, 300 grand, 3%. Same house today is 550 at 6%. Could not afford that today by a long shot. Yeah, I know. Just the increase on the interest rate could price out a lot of people out of that. So you got a good deal. Yep, early 90s, I made a decent profit within 6 months. I bought 2 houses from the sale. Cool. And Love Mode says scholarships are nice, but you have to do something to get it often. Also, many do not like the money with strings attached. Also, $60,000 for a house. What state was this? This was Clarksville, Tennessee. That's where that house was at. Of course, now it's 230. But yeah, back in the day when we bought it, yeah. Tennessee, yeah. Fairtha says, whoever updated the house went on a shopping spree at HD, Home Depot. I've been there so often, I know all the vinyl carpets, ceiling fans, and vanities by heart. I know, we Home Depot. We would do mostly Home Depot because when we got into investment real estate, I've rehabbed over 60 properties, and yeah, we had a commercial account and everything in the whole 9 yards. So yeah, it was we know our Home Depot. Adam says, yesterday my neighbor, John Correa, told me his real estate agent couldn't get anyone to rent his place, and his daughter put it up on Dongun Carrot Market and got a renter within hours. Oh, really? Ah, cool. I'm glad they rented it out. We're thinking about purchasing another apartment and renting it out. Daejeon has got Daejeon? No, I think it's Taegu has the military base, but we're close to Camp Humphreys, the U.S. military base over here, close to Pyeongtaek, and get another apartment. So there's a huge rental market here. So, but yeah, we had done real estate investing in the States, and yeah, that's always a concern of not being able to rent your apartment out. For us, it's going to be a little different because we're going to be able to pay for the apartment, and the only thing we'll have as far as fees is you'll have an emergency fund, emergency repair fund. You have the 10% management fee, which you're looking at what, $1,000,000, 1.4 million, 1.3 million won. So out of that will come 10%, and then after that, you might have a few incidentals, but the majority of that is going to be profit for us. But then again, it's it's going to be paid for, so that's a thing. So that's good. Ferrith says, dinner time over here. I'm starving. Printing some cable channels I designed today. Take care, Steve. Good seeing you. Yeah. Hey, send me an email with the cable channels that you're working on. I'd like to see that as well. I think with that said, we're going to go ahead and call this a day as well because it's almost 10 o'clock and I haven't had breakfast. The only thing I had was my latte, and it is empty. And I'm starting to get a little hangry, getting that nausea, hungry type of feeling. So I think that we're going to call this a day. So for the people that are watching, please like and subscribe to the channel. That would be the best thing that you could do for me. For everybody that was here, Adam, Ferrithis, Malovo, Nefertim, Dale, had some new people come on and stuff like that. Always good to have some good discussions on here. Talking about housing. Did anybody see in the United States where they've got 50-year mortgages now? And then what was it, the HUD? Is it HUD that removed the credit rating as a requirement for getting a home mortgage? Does anybody not see the problem with that? That's insane. Why? Absolutely crazy. George says, have a good one. Netventive says, have a great day. Yeah, I'm going to try to do that. But yeah, 50-year mortgages. Holy crow. 50-year mortgage. If you had like a $500,000 house and then you have a 30-year mortgage, you're probably going to pay $900,000 to maybe $1 million after the principal and all the interest. But if you're talking a 50-year mortgage, that's going to be like what, 1.5 altogether for the same $500,000 house. Just kind of thinking through it, it is absolutely insane. Ferrithis pops up and says 50-year mortgages. Thank you, Trump. Probably 200% interest over the life of the loan. Oh yeah, it'll be. It's like one for a $500,000 house. I forget the interest rate versus a 30-year versus a 50-year is going to be $936 or $63,000 principal and interest altogether. But with a 50-year mortgage, it's going to be like 1.3 or 1.4 million. Yeah, I don't get that. Crazy because, and then they dropped the credit score requirement for either HUD or FDA. Maybe is it not FDA, Food and Drug. Fannie, that's what it was. It was Fannie that they dropped that. Insane. Because now they gave a bunch of loans to people who don't have good credit scores, which did what in 2008? Created the housing bubble that popped. And yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. I am. Yeah, Adam's like, yeah, deja vu, 2008. And Love Mode says, yeah, well, you need a 50-year mortgage for the prices and paychecks today. Yeah, it's just a redo of that affordable housing thing. I just do a 500-year mortgage, default on death. Right. What, 50, 500? Why not? 100-year mortgage, 60, 70-year mortgage. When you get vehicle cars and you get vehicle loans for 7, 8 years and stuff like that, oh yeah, I knew housing mortgages were going to go up in term. It was just a matter of time. And wow, 50 years, that's insane. I don't know. What do you do? Okay, I think that's it because I'm really getting hungry. Default on death. Default on death. Okay, everybody. Thanks for watching and coming and having the discussion, the conversations. Rethinking retiring in the Philippines with the earthquakes, the volcanoes, and typhoons and things like that, and then the instability of the government, the corruption that is rearing its ugly head that has been going on for the last 10 or 15 years is adding to that instability. So I think we're going to hold off putting on for the Plan B retirement option of the Philippines. Maybe we're just going to wait and see. And then we talked about a bunch of other stuff, which was really cool, and I had a good time. So for those, again, like and subscribe to the channel. This is the obligatory. And if you want to email me, put that in the, official, theverylife@gmail.com. I answer every single email. I always do. Just give me time. These cool people over here bought me coffee. There's a link in the description box. You can do that as well. If not, no big deal. The best thing that you could do, like the video. Please, please, please. I'm retired. It's one of the things that I want to do is to grow the YouTube channel and get more likes and views and subs and all that stuff. So you could help me with that. And we can have a good discussion along the way. Anyway, with that, we will end with what Nefertum says, and have a great one, Steve. And everybody else, you have a great one as well. And hopefully we will see you on the next video. Dale comes back. Great to meet you all, and thanks for the chat. Take care, everyone, and I'll catch you next time. And that's how I'm going to end it. We'll catch you next time on the next video. Peace. Good stuff. Good stuff. That was a good one.